So the standard way of opening a file in Photoshop is to use just the regular old File Open menu command. And that just brings up your regular operating system open dialog. And of course, you would navigate to the directory or folder that you were trying to find your images in. That's fine, it works, it's great. But there's actually, I think, a much more visual way to open images or find the images that you want to open. And that's, of course, to use Adobe Bridge. So rather than File Open, you'll see there's a File Browse in Bridge command. If you're a keyboard shortcut junkie, you can see Command O or Control O on Windows is your standard open keyboard shortcut. And then there's a variant of that, Command Option O or Control Alt O to browse in Bridge. If I go ahead and choose that menu command instead, that will switch you to a different application called Adobe Bridge. So there's one disadvantage there is that it is a separate app, but it's an app meant for viewing and browsing and finding images very easily. And then, of course, you can see your visual thumbnails there. I have a particular folder that I'm working from here, and if I want to open up a file, you just simply double-click on the thumbnail, and that will pop that back open in Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and close this file by clicking the little close box in the Document tab. Instead of using the File menu, you also have a handy little button here in what's called the Application bar. And it has a little bridge icon, and when you hover over it, it tells Launch in Bridge. So if you click on that and you don't want to memorize the keyboard shortcut, that's a way to switch back over to Bridge. And of course, if Bridge wasn't already open, this would have caused Bridge to launch the first time there. There's a boomerang button, so if all you want to do is return back to Photoshop and not open any additional files here, you can click the boomerang icon, and that's just a way to switch back and forth by clicking buttons to go back and forth between Bridge and Photoshop. One little variant bonus tip here, let's go back to Bridge for a second. Here I was just double-clicking on a JPEG. If I double-click on this JPEG, of course, it's going to open in Photoshop. This file here is a raw file. It's got the file extension .dng. Again, if you're shooting a Canon, it might be CR2, or a Nikon, it might be NEF. But when you double click on a raw file, regardless of the file extension, if it's a raw file, Bridge intercepts that raw file and opens it up in the Camera Raw dialog. I'll go ahead and double click on that, and some of you have probably already seen this before. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel to take this back to Bridge. If I clicked the open image button, then it would pass this on over and open it up inside Photoshop. Here's the bonus tip. Whenever you see a file in Bridge that has this little icon here in the upper right corner of the thumbnail, that's your settings icon. It lets you know that this file has had settings applied to it in the Camera Raw dialog. And of course, this is relevant for both JPEGs and RAW files. And if you see that, you may have already chosen the settings you want for this particular image, and you don't really want to have to open it up back in Camera Raw before it goes into Photoshop. So if that's what you're wanting, just hold down the Shift key and double click. And that will skip the Camera Raw dialog and open that up in Photoshop and use the settings that were saved for that file. So there you have it, a couple different ways to open files, standard File Open command, or the more visual approach by using Adobe Bridge.